Mark, most people think high blood pressure is a symptom of aging or genetics. From your perspective, what are the top 5 main causes of high blood pressure, hypertension?
Well, I'm going to start by saying, first of all, Ben, aging is something that causes high blood pressure for most people. It's this idea of arteriosclerosis. We hear this hardening of the arteries, which is an age-related factor, but that's normally because the body's not getting the inputs it needs in order to keep the blood vessels where they would be optimally. So age is a factor. However, what I can't stand about that is this idea that rising blood pressure is just what happens, because the answer is no. What happens to a car when you don't change the oil is the engine seizes up, but that doesn't mean that the engine seizing up is normal for a car. It's normal if you don't take care of it and provide the input it needs. So this idea that this is just normal is offensive to me. Honestly, I can't stand that. So yeah, do I believe that aging is a related factor in hypertension? Sure. But other contributing factors that are part of that is I don't eat the right diet as I'm aging. I don't exercise as I'm aging. I have perhaps a genetic predisposition towards hypertension that is greater as I age. So all of these things are factors, age included, but what all age does is it multiplies whatever is happening by time. So all of these things are the factors. All that's happening is if 10 years have gone by or 40 years have gone by, I've just had those inputs times 40 years.
Compound over time.
Yeah, it's not that age is causing it, but all of these factors are being multiplied by time.
That makes sense. Okay, so with the diet part, what are some of the worst foods that raise high blood pressure?
Gosh, there's so many schools on this. I don't even want to answer that question because like someone yells about it no matter what you say. I would argue and say that people who are like, oh, don't do fat, so on and so forth, I would argue and say, no, that's not accurate. As a matter of fact, that's not causing the problem. In fact, healthy fats are helping the problem if you're not compounding it with 1,000 other things. But I would say the biggest food, if I can even call it that is causing this problem for people. I want to preface my answer and say, the doctor takes your blood pressure and says, oh, you have hypertension, pre-hypertensive. We need to get you on drugs immediately, right? We know all of that story. Go to a low sodium diet.
Yeah, that's the common method.
Right. It's almost prescriptive that you need to go on low sodium. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because biologically your body can't actually have too much salt because too much salt in the body ends up just getting discharged in your urine, right? Like it's going to go away. The only time that you have a sodium increase in your body measurably is when you've intaken too much sugar. So what happens is we've correlated high sodium with hypertension, but the real fact of the matter is that people who have hypertension, they measure them and say, oh, their sodium's high. This is what's causing the problem. It's like, no, their sugar intake is high and the body is retaining sodium to balance out the amount of sugar that the person is taking in. Fix your sugar problem and you fix your sodium problem and you don't have to eat weird. But the reality is we've correlated sodium with high blood pressure when in fact high blood pressure is usually I'm not going to say usually, I'm always careful to diagnose here, but high sugar intake will cause you hypertension. Yeah. And people don't make that connection because there's this, I'm going to just call it cultural knowledge that we've all just taken in, right? It's just the things that we've heard so much that we believe they're true without challenge. And I think that's one of them.
I agree. He's spot on, Mark, because when first of all, don't blame the salt for what sugar did, to your point. When we have high levels of blood sugar because of high carbohydrate, processed foods, we obviously raise blood glucose and that lowers nitric oxide.
Also true.
It strips it and then it creates vasoconstriction, which for those who don't know, your heart has to pump harder because the narrowing of the arteries, which causes your blood pressure to go up because your heart is pumping harder.
You got a kink in the garden hose.
Perfect analogy. And that's not the salt, it's the sugar. It's not the burger, it's the bun.
100%.
So don't be afraid of salt. Now, you mentioned there are some people who have certain genetics that are like sodium sensitive. I'm actually one of those people. I'm sodium sensitive. And when I have too much, even though it's not the actual sodium that raises blood pressure, there's a subset of people that have certain genes that it can happen. But that is very rare. For the majority of people, it's not that. It's your nutrition. It's the sugar. It's the processed carbohydrates. It's the bad fats, the inflammatory foods. So don't be afraid of salt. As a matter of fact, you want healthy salt.
Correct.
You're going to feel great that way. You mentioned exercise and the lack of exercise. You said especially as you age. How is that leading to hypertension?
I'm going to say two things to that. And then one is, and I'm glad you said the type of exercise, because not all exercise is created equally.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that happens with people who have hypertension is that they immediately want to do things like run. I should probably take up walking or running and so on and so forth. Those are good things. I'm never going to tell somebody not to go walking or not to go running. But there is something to be said for people who are involving themselves in aerobic exercise. And aerobic exercise doesn't necessarily solve the problem. In fact, if you're dealing with high blood pressure, aerobic exercise actually increases heart rate and can actually lead to more stress, right? Like my blood pressure goes through the roof when I'm running. Like that's not surprising. That's actually part of the deal. But you're strengthening your heart, but you're not solving the blood pressure issue. So there are specific types of exercise that are much better for blood pressure, such as like isometrics. In fact, even weight training. But isometric specifically is actually a better form of exercise as opposed to doing cardio.
So isometrics, some examples of that would be like farmer's carries, hanging from a pull-up bar, or give me an example of
so I always use the example, and people don't understand isometric specifically because it is not a talked about form. Like we consider eccentric versus concentric movement, right? So a sit-up, and when I go up on the sit-up, I'm contracting a muscle group. That's concentric movement. When I lay back down from the sit-up, that's eccentric movement. It's the extension of the muscle. So the muscle constricts, constricts. I'm going to find my words here. It constricts and then it expands. Isometric is literally the opposite of that. It is holding a muscle in an equal measurement,
like a plank,
for a period of time. It would be the plank to a sit-up. So sit-ups are up and down, up and down. Plank is holding it exactly in the same space for whatever period of time. Now, the ideal time for a plank is actually 2 minutes. I don't know if you know that.
Can you do 2 minutes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like after the 2 minutes, you start getting a declining, diminishing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, 2 minutes is like the perfect plank.
So don't go beyond 2 minutes.
You can, but
you'll get some diminishing returns.
You've already gotten what you were getting out of it.
And when you say plank, are we talking about like a full plank with your hands on the ground, or a half plank with your elbows and forearms? Either one.
Either one's good.
Because the full plank is easier than at least for me.
I actually like a forearm plank better.
That's easier for you?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the person.
Funny? Yeah, actually, I've got a weak left shoulder, so it's like actually a high plank is actually harder for me to hold than a forearm plank.
Interesting. For me, it's the opposite.
That's funny.
What about like burst training, like sprinting, basketball, pickleball? You said you play volleyball. These burst training, is that beneficial for high blood pressure?
Any kind of performance training is good, but what you're doing is you're just strengthening the heart at that point, right? Like any kind of, I would rather, like when I run, a lot of people just like do the jog, and it's like I actually do intervals. So I'll do the run 2 minutes, walk a minute, let the heart go up. And then just as the heart starts to go to a point of exhaustion, bring it back down, go back up, bring it back down. It's very similar to like HIIT training. A lot of gyms are into HIIT training now, where you're doing your 2 minute cycle of something, and then you get your 30 seconds off. Yeah. And then you go back to your 2 minutes. Very similar to that when you're talking about like running in intervals, but sprinting, literally to just do a 30-second to a minute sprint is better than a 15-minute jog.
I agree. And even not just for blood pressure, but for fat loss too.
Just for fat loss, for anything. Like it's a healthier form. And we can go back to that ancestral caveman kind of vibe, right? Like when did a caveman ever jog? Like that was never the thing, right? No. They sprinted. There was danger. Get away from the danger. And as soon as the danger's gone, stop. Yeah. Like that was an optimal form of movement.
They walked a lot.
Lots of walking. Jog. There was no reason to jog.
Mark Sisson has a whole book about that. Born to Walk. He's correct. Mm-hmm. Do you have an Oura Ring?
I do.
So question on the Oura Ring app, they give you this this cardiovascular score. Where is it? It tells you your let's see.
Let me age.
See. Yeah, your age of your cardiovascular system, and this is not completely accurate, but it's giving you an idea. Here we go. It's called your cardiovascular age is below your. Well, I'm reading what it's saying to me, but it's under heart health, and it gives you your cardio capacity, your cardiovascular age based off of your sleep, your heart rate variability, your resting heart rate. Mine says 14 years younger and cardio capacity high.
I'm looking mine up.
I'm wondering if you put much value into this. I would love for it to be super valuable because mine's showing 14 years younger, but I'm wondering if this has any validity to it. It's under the first homepage here. When you hit more under the heart rate, yeah, you'll see it there.
Yep, mine shows 12 years younger.
Okay, that's good.
It used to be better. I'm not gonna lie.
That's still pretty damn
I
good.
think I've aged a little.
If you have an Oura Ring, you could find it on the homepage under your heart rate. Hit the more button. It'll be heart health.
Yeah, mine is actually showing bad because my HRV, I've been traveling for like the last 2 weeks.
That'll tank the HRV.
Yeah, my HRV was like single digits for the last couple of days.
Oh my gosh, dude. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was.
That only gets like that when I'm super sick for me.
Yeah, it was so bad. And my HRV tends to run low anyways, interestingly enough, which again, HRV, for those watching, having a low HRV is not necessarily terrible as long as it's consistently that way as opposed to spiking up and down.
Find your baseline.
Find your baseline.
Make sure it doesn't drop below the baseline.
Yeah. Measure against your baseline. Don't measure against everybody else's baseline.
Correct.
But yeah, I dropped into single digits. So I'm sure that's why it's yelling at me right now.
Still pretty good at 12 years younger.
Totally.
So we have nutrition as a big part here. Don't be afraid of salt. High quality salt is great. It's the sugar, it's the glucose spikes, the insulin. Healthy fats are good for you. Exercise is important, but the right type of exercise, burst training, anaerobic, isometric holds. What else is contributing to high blood pressure?
Yeah, I'm actually going to put in there nutritional depletion. And I know we talked about food intake, but I think there's also a conversation about what we don't take in.
Yeah.
And that is, I link that to supplementation, to be honest with you. And that is, what are we doing to supplement? And I just was teaching a class on this recently. And the conversation was in terms of supplementation. Not all supplements are created equal, first of all. But supplementation has lost for a lot of people. It's overwhelming. Like it's literally just so overwhelming that people don't even know what they should be taking, much less why they're taking what they're taking. And they want to do the right thing. And it's like, well, isn't there just a multivitamin I can take? It's like, yeah, but that doesn't solve the problem. I actually put my supplements into 4 different categories. And again, I was just teaching this class the other day, and one of them is specifically just nutritional depletion. Like there are things that my diet should be giving me and isn't. And if a person is eating keto, great. Then you need to find the way to get some of the things that you may not get if you're eating in a specific way. Same for vegetarians, same for vegans, same for people who eat in whatever form that they eat. Find the ways to get the things that your body still needs without that. So I break into nutritional, I break into anti-aging. And anti-aging, I use 4 main supplements for that. And I'll do AKG, I'll do resveratrol, spermidine, and NMN. And those are my 4 anti-aging supplements that I take. And I take for oxidation. So I'll take antioxidants such as astaxanthin, C60, things that are specifically geared towards antioxidation. And then I've got another category that is actually what I call optimization. And optimization is probably more of what we're referring to here through supplements for cardiovascular, but that's things like nitric oxide supplements and things that are increasing brain potential. So anything along those categories, that's that optimization range. But I do believe that a lot of it is a nutritional depletion. Like people just aren't getting what they should be getting. Like a carrot today is not the same as a carrot 50 years ago, is not the same as a carrot 100 years ago. And that's soil depletion. That's the length of time that a food gets to, that it's getting transported to the store where you're buying it. Like when was it pulled out of the ground? And you don't know that. It is obviously things like, glyphosate.
Yeah, all the chemicals
that are being sprayed on there. So there's so many things going into that. And not to mention even the fact that even at farms, like they're not giving the soil a break. So the same crop is being planted in the exact same soil year after year after year because it's not profitable to take a year off. But the land needs that. I mean, that's biblical.
Yeah, this is true.
Like the land needs a break. So yeah, just soil depletion in of itself is not doing that. And I think we need to be cognizant of that. I think for your audience, they're keen on that conversation already. But the general population is so under educated on those types of things that I don't think they know. But, to a 5th thing that leads to hypertension, just nutritional depletion. Like people just aren't getting what they need.
Because you're right. That's the thought process is, why do I need to take supplements? I can get everything I need from food maybe 30 years ago. possibly, for eating pretty clean back then. But the soils, the crops, it's a very different ballgame. The nutrient qualities are depleted compared to 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, but according to USDA standards, to support your immune system, the way that you're immune, just the immune system, nothing else, every single day you would need to be eating 5 ounces of salmon, an entire cup of spinach, 2 oranges, and like 8 avocados or some ridiculous number. And it's like, no one's eating that.
No.
Not to mention every day. Yeah. You know, and that's just the part of, first of all, it sounds like a disgusting meal, let's be honest.
I was thinking of that altogether.
But the reality is like no one's eating that every single day.
No, they're not.
And I say that when we decide what we eat, and this is why, you know, supplementation and stuff is so important in my life, because if I asked you, you want to go to lunch, the following words are what? There's 3 words everybody uses. What sounds good? Like, why does the sound of something control what I'm going to eat today?
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's based on a craving. It's based on, you know,
taste.
Probably a microbiome, you know, urge that wants me to eat something because my gut knows I need something. But if I feed my gut enough of the bad stuff, it's going to keep wanting the bad stuff now. So now my urges are unhealthy urges on top of it. Like, I've never been like, hey, Ben, let's go grab lunch, right? Like, there's this great place down the road that has 5 ounces of salmon and a cup of spinach and 2 oranges.
and 8 avocados.
And 8 avocados and maybe 5, you know, mussels or something. Who knows? Like, we don't eat like that.
Yeah.
And if we're not going to eat like that, and admittedly, we're not, then we need to make sure that we're at least getting the nutrition we need.
Yeah, I agree. And I you know, if you look at my pantry, it's like the vitamin shop. I have a whole bunch of supplements and I use them cyclically. I have a blood pressure cuff here, and I test my blood pressure pretty consistently. I'm just curious to see what certain caffeine, food, and stress, and whatever it is does to my blood pressure. And supplements have helped lower it, like vitamin E, magnesium, potassium. But when I started using the Zona, I started to see a huge difference over time. And we'll get to this incredible technology to help lower blood pressure as a great alternative to medication and even taking a whole bunch of supplements. But before we get there, there's one more thing I wanted to add to the conversation on what leads or increases hypertension.
Yeah.
Antiseptic mouthwash.
Kills nitric oxide.
Share more about that. What is that doing to blood pressure?
Absolutely. There's so many things that we use. And nitric oxide is your body's most powerful vasodilator, as I think you'd already alluded to a minute ago. And vasodilation is, of course, when your cardiovascular system opens the widening of the blood vessel. And obviously, we talked about the kink in the garden hose. You talked about vasoconstriction. Yeah. Vasodilation is the opposite of that. It's when the blood vessel opens wider. Well, imagine putting the same amount of fluid, albeit blood in this case, through a wider opening versus a narrower opening. The pressure is going to be lower. That just stands to reason. Nitric oxide is your body's best vasodilator. In fact, a lot of people, and I'm going to go one step further from that and say specifically for women, estrogen is an incredible vasodilator, which is why postmenopausal women typically end up, let me give you some stats here, prior to the menopausal age, whatever that is for each woman respectively, because there's a window, but it varies.
55 on average or so.
Yeah, somewhere in that range, but perimenopause starts sooner.
Yep.
So men are 3 to 1 more likely to have a cardiovascular event than a premenopausal woman.
Because of the estrogen?
Well, just in general.
Okay.
Post-menopause, women actually have a 60% more likelihood of having a cardiovascular event than men.
Wow. And that's because of the loss of estrogen, you're saying?
It's the loss of estrogen
nitric oxide?
actually depletes,
or
estrogen is a vasodilator.
Creates more vasoconstriction.
Correct. So estrogen actually, well, estrogen isn't, it's a vasodilator.
Yeah, so it's
not that it's
dilation.
creating constriction.
Got it.
It's just not allowing for dilation. And it becomes a big topic. And I had this conversation recently in a TV documentary, and we were talking about how the fact that we think of heart attacks and cardiovascular events. I always grew up that it was a problem that men needed to watch out for.
Me too.
And that was just my upbringing. And I'm 50 years old. And it's like, but my upbringing has always been, that's a male problem. Men need to watch out for this. And it's like, well, wait a minute here. Like, if you actually look at the statistics, cardiovascular events typically happen to people that are older anyways. And the older the person is, the more likely it is that a woman's having this heart attack. But we've deemed it a men's problem. Like, no, this is very much a woman's problem. And it's all about this vasodilator dilation problem. And again, you're talking about nitric oxide specifically, which is true. Antiseptic mouthwash will actually kill nitric oxide, which is very often produced in the mouth. Nasal breathing is a big part of increasing nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide supplements, talking about, diet, eating foods that are rich in nitric oxide. You see a lot about beets and these types of things. They're rich in vitamins and I will say building blocks that create nitric oxide. Things like, L-citrulline or L-arginine. These types of rich products are going to create that system in the body so that nitric oxide does get created. The other thing, you mentioned stress, so we have to talk on that for a moment.
Yeah.
Stress and environmental issues are another big thing for people with hypertension, because the more a person stresses, the more the person lives in a sympathetic nervous system, and sympathetic nervous system is going to constantly create a high blood pressure situation because it's going to increase heart rate constantly. It's going to put your body in survival mode, and any of the functioning areas of the body that are not deemed necessary for immediate survival, they go on pause. And when that happens, we end up in that state, and being able to bring your body back to a parasympathetic or a rest and digest state actually leads to lower blood pressure, right?
Yeah.
So stress related to things obviously happens, and different people have different stresses that cause that. I laugh because, go back to our Oura Ring, my Oura Ring doesn't think I'm stressed ever.
Wow.
Which cracks me up. So I'm almost convinced that my Oura Ring just thinks stress is the baseline.
Probably, bro.
Like if my ring doesn't think I'm stressed, like there's something totally wrong.
That's just the baseline for Mark.
That's just normal for Mark.
Travel,
right?
running a business.
True, it's something else.
You're right. Stress is a big issue. HRV is a good gauge for that, to see if you're adapting to the stress. How well are you doing with balancing your nervous system, parasympathetic, sympathetic? And the mouthwash thing is important because a lot of people use it. 100 million people or so use antiseptic mouthwash, and about 100 million people have high blood pressure. Coincidence? I don't know. So studies are showing just 7 days of using mouthwash raises blood pressure. But when you stop taking it, within just a matter of days or weeks, your blood pressure starts to get normalized because it is destroying the bacteria in your mouth that convert food that you mentioned into nitric oxide. That's a problem. So step number one, no antiseptic mouthwash. Get rid of it. Get rid of the fluoride. Eat the salt. Avoid the sugar. Exercise is also great for nitric oxide, as well as all the other things you said. What about sauna and nitric oxide and high blood pressure?
Sauna is actually good for blood pressure, albeit a lot of physicians will tell you to stay out of a sauna because it'll raise blood pressure. Now, like any form of exercise, it is going to increase blood pressure for about 15, 20 minutes. So once you get out of the sauna, your blood pressure will be elevated, but it does go down. But what ends up happening when you're in a sauna is you do end up conditioning your cardiovascular system. It's very detoxifying while you're in a sauna. So yeah, you're correct. Sauna will actually lead to a reduced hypertension.
Yeah, I love
over time.
I love it's a hormetic stress. All right, let's talk about Zona. This is a really cool technology. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding it up here. It's a handheld isometric device that I want you to explain it, but it's designed to lower blood pressure and kind of looks like one of those what was it called that you said?
It's actually a joystick is the real word for it. It sounds very gamish.
It is a joystick. Look at it here. Explain how this works. It's called the Zona Plus.
So Zona, you mentioned that it looks like a joystick, and you're kind of treating it like a fighter pilot here, which is exactly where it came from. The design actually came from from a U.S. Air Force study, and it was kind of a serendipitous finding. As we call it, the accidental discovery, because it was from research done in the Air Force that the data came from that actually triggered the work that went into understanding how isometrics work and the way it works. Now, I will never say that it lowers blood pressure because I obey FDA guidelines.
Yeah, he didn't say it. I
didn't say it.
I saw it lower.
Very clear there.
I saw it lower my blood pressure.
There you go.
That?
It's testimonial, folks. I did not endorse that. But
share the story of how it was discovered.
So the researcher, his name was Dr. Ron Wiley. He actually was hired by the U.S. Air Force to talk about how pilots go into G-force blackout. So for anybody who's seen the Top Gun movie, where he goes up on that steep rise and then passes out, and then Tom Cruise has to find a bunch of ways to get him back. And the that's normal for a fighter pilot. And back in the 80s, the U.S. Air Force was trying to study that and find out how can they stop that from happening. Well, Ron Wiley got involved to measure this. So, of course, we're talking military guys that are in peak condition anyways. All of their physical measurements and health histories are taken at the beginning of the study. They're monitored throughout their time. And then at the end, when they're wrapping up all their research, one of the things that he just happened to notice was that every single one of their blood pressure actually decreased over the course of the study. And he's like, well, that's got to be related to something more than random. Like, why are these pilots who are flying every day? Because they were flying every day now versus before that, they wouldn't fly every day. Like, pilots don't fly every single day of the week. So the increased amount, and he's like, well, that's weird. What's going on here? So over time, something was happening, and he was trying to figure out what was going on. So he took all this data. The U.S. Air Force study was over. He took the data and was like, I'm going to spend my time researching this. And he got a grant and he started working on it. And ultimately his conclusion was that the grip that the pilots had on the joystick, which actually flies the plane, right? That's how they're steering. That's how they're accelerating, all of that taking place. Correct. He actually attributed and was able to correlate the grip strength to the reduced blood pressure, and not necessarily the compression of it, but the fact that they were holding it at the exact same grip. It was the isometric hold. And we talked about isometrics, that plank as opposed to a sit-up, right? They're not letting go and squeezing and doing weird things. They're holding on for dear life, let's be honest. When they're doing that, that's what he attributed to. And he's like, I wonder if that's got a connection here. So he started studying grip strength, but not grip strength in terms of how much a person can grip, because that's actually a misconception about Zona. People are like, oh, it's like one of those grip things.
Yeah, that's what I thought at first too.
I know a lot of people do. And they're like, oh, this measures it. Oh, I know the connection because grip strength and longevity. I'm like, nope. And they're like, oh, it's like a stress ball. Nope. No. Oh, it's like, no, it's not. And normally I start conversations with like, let's get rid of everything you think it is, because it's none of those things. It's something completely different than what your intuition says. But our minds want to associate things with things we already understand.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you tell me about some piece of novel information, I go hunting for all of the things that I already understand so that I can make an association which fast tracks my understanding. Get rid of all of that. Okay. This is a biofeedback device that is actually having you hold a compression at an isometric grip strength, which is equal measurement, over a period of algorithmically calculated time. So you start off by doing your maximum voluntary contraction, we call it, which is how hard can you grip on your right hand. Then it measures your left hand. Internally, it's calculating what would be the perfect amount of grip strength for Ben to hold this device. And we're going to have him hold that for 2 minutes. We talked about a perfect plank is 2 minutes long.
Oh, yeah.
Not coincidence. Right. When I'm holding that at that static grip, the device is giving me biofeedback. It's giving me beeps. It's giving me the images on the screen. It's giving me both visual and auditory clues that maybe I've gripped a little more, or maybe I should let up a little bit. Yeah. And it's keeping me in an optimal range, which would be isometric. And imagine you're doing a plank, but we all start to fidget a little to the left. We all adjust our back.
It gives you some cues that you're
it's like the trainer
too
is
hard,
standing
too
over
soft.
you.
Yeah, got it. It's like the trainer.
Like you're doing an isometric plank, and the trainer's like kicking you every time that you try to move in one direction or the other, right? And I see people at my gym and they're doing planks, but it's like then their butt goes up in the air. I'm like, no, that's not a pike. Cheating. Now it's a pike. It's not a plank. And you see all these different modifications, and it's because our body wants to go to a place of comfort. Yeah. It doesn't want to go to a place of discomfort. And this is causing discomfort. Like holding anything for 2 minutes at a static resistance. Like, remember when we were kids and the teacher was like, oh, you won't quit talking. Like stand here on the chalkboard with your hand up on the board. Yeah. And you're like, wow, that's a big punishment. You know, like a minute later, you're like, my arm hurts, right? Because anything like that, like
we're not used to it.
Carry the laundry like this and see how far you get down the block before your arms start to hurt because it's holding it in the same grip, or anything like that. It's uncomfortable, and our bodies want to move towards comfort. The biofeedback in this is keeping you in the exact same discomfort. It's not painful, but it's uncomfortable. It's weird, and it focuses like we call it an active meditation, right? Like it puts your mind in a point of singularity because you have to pay attention to it, but not because you're not doing anything. You're actually doing something, but the something is holding still.
And each session, What's the average duration of each session? I know you're doing both hands. Is it just 5 minutes or so? Or?
So it's 2 minutes on the right, then 2 minutes on the left, and then repeat. But there's a minute break between the two of them. And
so around 10 minutes or so.
About 11.
11.
About 11.
And once a day, you recommend doing this?
So our clinical trials, I probably shouldn't even say this on camera.
Oh, no?
Our clinical trials are actually all scheduled for 3 times per week is actually what all of our,
sessions per week.
Is.
So 33 minutes.
3 uses a week, and you can use the device. Now, we recommend people do it 5 times a week.
Okay.
Because if I tell you 5, you probably hit 3.
Yeah, correct.
Most physicians that recommend the device actually just tell people to do it daily because they find that compliance is actually higher out of patients who actually do something every day
Makes
as
sense.
opposed to skipping days.
Yeah.
Because if you skip a day,
that might lead
back
to 2
into
days,
it,
3
you may
days.
forget. Correct.
Minerals, minerals, minerals. You hear a lot of people out there speaking about the benefits of taking minerals. And it is important because in this day and age, our crops, our fruits, and our vegetables, they are depleted of minerals. So you've heard of the keto flu. You've heard of symptoms doing keto and fasting. People just don't feel good sometimes. This is the number one reason why. So my go-to for replenishing my electrolytes and my minerals, for enhancing my immune system, for gut support, for detoxification, is Bean Minerals. It has fulvic and humic compounds, and these have over 70 trace minerals and really important electrolytes to replenish your body with. Check out Bean Minerals over at beanminerals.com. Use the coupon code Azadi, my last name, at checkout to get a nice discount. That is AZADI at checkout over at beanminerals.com.
What are people primarily using this for?
You can put me in a trick box here, Ben. People use it to reduce blood pressure. Which I'm going to say that what this does is I'm going to link. We still haven't gotten into why isometrics even lowers blood pressure to begin with, which I want to get into. But people use this device in order to do a perfect isometric exercise because it's giving you the biofeedback. So the device itself is registered with the FDA under the same classification, a class 1 exercise device. So the device itself is exercise. It's just giving you the biofeedback to do a perfect exercise session. Isometrics itself is actually what leads to that cardiovascular conditioning that we're talking about. That's what's helping your cardiovascular system. So there's a few different things happening when you're using, a few different things happen with everything, but I'm going to walk you through a couple of those things because we've touched on them and I kind of want to tie those loops off.
Okay.
One being the nitric oxide connection. When you're using Zona and you're in an uncomfortable position for 2 minutes, what happens is your subconscious mind fires faster than your conscious mind, right? When my body senses danger before I realize what the danger is. And in so doing, when I'm holding an isometric grip and it's uncomfortable, my body assumes, or my brain assumes rather, that my body's going to put itself back into a position of comfort, and it doesn't. And when it doesn't, the brain assumes something's wrong. When the brain thinks something is wrong, it immediately flips into a sympathetic nervous system, believing that it needs to do something because survival is at stake here.
Yeah.
Right? So your lizard brain pops into this survival mode. We go into sympathetic nervous system. Moving into sympathetic nervous system immediately triggers nitric oxide production because the brain knows that the blood needs to flow throughout the body freely in order to survive. There's a problem in this muscle group right now. I need to feed blood to it the best way I know how, and that's going to be through vasodilation. Let's kick up the nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide systemically flushes through the body. Now, when the 2-minute session is over on my right arm, the reason we take a 1-minute break is because it actually downregulates our nervous system back to parasympathetic because the danger went away. Right? We'll go back to that caveman. The lion showed up. I sprinted for 2 minutes. Lion's out of sight now. Calm back down. Right? I go back to my parasympathetic. I do my left arm. I go back to my sympathetic. I rest back to my parasympathetic when it's over.
And you go back
you're
to
correct.
each one.
I'm
So 2
doing
times
that
each.
4 times a day because right, left.
Yeah.
So I'm actually flipping, which is actually teaching the body how to downregulate my nervous system. So I'm actually going sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic, which net effect for those of your audience who are real savvy on this stuff actually increases vagal tone because I'm actually training the vagus nerve to be able to downregulate by itself without any other kind of stimulus, which is a whole different conversation that I'll leave for another day.
Yeah, and that should increase HRV as well.
That's correct. Because you're actually getting your body to be able to downregulate faster than it normally would because it's doing it more often. It's kind of like a sprint with a walk.
Interesting. So even if you don't have high blood pressure and you're watching and listening, but you want to increase the heart rate variability, this could potentially be a tool for that.
I would 100% support that decision.
I'm actually going to experiment with that because I've used this not consistently. Now I'm going to use it consistently. I'm going to test my HRV because that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Sympathetic, parasympathetic, back and forth. That's how you get that balance and increase the HRV.
Correct. Because HRV usually, it's why they tell you, make sure you're not exposed to blue light. Make sure you're not eating close to going to bed. Make sure that you're out of sight of noise. Make sure they're in dark. All of those things trigger sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
Like all you're doing is keeping all of these stimuli away from you, which keeps your parasympathetic. So before you fall asleep, your body's in recovery mode because it's spent 2 to 3 hours optimally without any kind of stimulus like that.
Yeah.
This is actually helping your body. I would arguably say that it's actually bringing your body to that position of parasympathetic faster than normal.
So is it better to do this at night or is it better time during the day?
Most people do it during the morning.
Okay.
Doesn't
matter.
Because it's not the use of the device. I will say the immediate use of the device that's doing that.
It's the
long-term
over time compounding. That makes sense.
So that parasympathetic sympathetic response is a thing, and it also leads to nitric oxide production, which means that nitric oxide flooding the body is going to lead to vasodilation, which leads to lower pressure. Now, what I will say is that most nitric oxide production is completely metabolized in the body within about 6 hours of that release anyways. So doing this, you'd have to do it every 6 hours. Like even if you take a nitric oxide supplement.
In 6 hours, most of it's metabolized.
It depends on the supplement and what's the triggering agent in the supplement. But usually you're looking at about 6 hours before that's
actually longer than I would have thought.
Most will say 4.
Okay.
I'll say 6 because there are some that'll go longer. But yes, the nitric oxide gets metabolized. It doesn't have a long half-life. So usually what you're getting out of that is that it gets a spike and then a decline. But nevertheless, that's a very short-term solution. That's not a long-term solution to nitric oxide production, right? It's going to happen, but it's going to spurt. That's not going to control blood pressure because blood pressure is a very different underlying problem, which what I want to get into. So we've talked about the sympathetic, parasympathetic. We've talked about the nitric oxide release that takes place. All good things about using the device, but not even what it's made for. So kind of interesting, but those aren't even the reasons. Those just happen to be byproducts of also doing isometrics. The real benefit of isometric exercise, we talk about age as being a possible cause to hypertension being a symptom. Now, we've heard of arteriosclerosis. That's the hardening of the arteries, right? Imagine that the artery itself is lined with what we call an endothelium. The endothelium in the cardiovascular system is kind of like a sponge. Right? So think of it as a spongy material. And over time, if not fed properly, that sponge begins to dry. So imagine what a dry sponge is like. Now take a dry sponge and try to wash out the inside of a glass, right? Like you can't even get it in the glass.
Not going to work.
Much less being able to do anything with it because it's lost its flexibility. That's arteriosclerosis.
That's a good explanation.
That's what's happened. You've got a dried sponge, but not just anything rehydrates that sponge. There's a very specific outcome that actually rehydrates that endothelium. But I want to point out the endothelium itself is like the body's natural thermostat for hypertension. So functional medicine is reminding your body of what it already knew, right? Like we're going to do things that make our body remember what it once knew how to do. At 18 years old, nobody was on antihypertensives, maybe the occasional person, so whatever. But by and large, hypertension is not a childhood problem. And the reason for it is because everything's new, right? Nothing's not new anymore. And your body's able to do a lot of things because it was born to survive. And the body's made to survive, right? Your body will do everything to stay alive. Yeah. And it naturally heals and it naturally regulates. And there's thousands of things going on in my body right now, but the only thing my mind is doing is talking to Ben Azadi, right? But my body knows what to do on its own without me going, okay, now breathe, now take another breath, now take another breath, right? Like all these things are happening on a very subconscious basis. Well, over time, what ends up happening with that endothelium is it is the body's natural thermostat. Now think of a thermostat, for those who are not familiar with HVAC analogies. It's kind of the thing that tells the furnace to turn on. So the furnace may be working perfectly fine and it's cold in the house, but if the thermostat doesn't work, the furnace doesn't know to turn on. Mm-hmm. And the endothelium functions that way for the body. When blood pressure gets high, it's the endothelium that tells the body to dilate the blood vessels to allow more flow. When the endothelium doesn't function, the blood vessels just stay constricted. Mm. So the blood pressure is going up, and it's literally because the body doesn't know it's going up. Oh. Like the sensor is broken. So the way that we can fix the body's ability to manage its own blood pressure is by fixing the sensor, right? We're going into root cause issues. Like, I hate the fact that blood pressure is treated like a disease, or hypertension, I suppose, is the disease, because it's a symptom of something else going on, and we're too busy fixing the symptom that we're not getting into the root. The root is you've got a hardened endothelium because it hasn't been treated the way that it should have been treated. We need to provide the stimulus for the body to react. Connecting that with isometrics. How does isometrics actually restore health to the endothelium? Like, I'm putting in chapter headings for myself here. Moving on, chapter 2. The chapter heading here is going to be, how do we restore that flexibility to the endothelium?
That's what everybody wants to know.
This is where the biohack comes in, right? Yeah. This is the combo shot to the corner pocket. We've talked about how this is going to have you hold a static resistance in a muscle group, right? I'm holding it for 2 minutes, isometric, it's uncomfortable, sympathetic response, nitric oxide is coming out, everything is happening right now. My arm is still uncomfortable. And when the arm is uncomfortable, do a plank for a period of time, do a wall sit for a period of time, cross your legs for a period of time. What ends up happening? I've switched, which leg was crossed here multiple times while we've been sitting here talking. Why? Me too. Because of blood flow restriction.
Yeah.
The body's automatically reacting to that blood flow restriction, and it's forcing me into a state of comfort. If I continued to stay with my leg crossed, even when it was uncomfortable, my brain starts to think something's wrong. Now, blood flow restriction, we talk about, your leg falls asleep, so on and so forth. But if I'm holding something at a muscle contraction, because crossing my legs doesn't cause a muscular problem. If I were to do something that causes that muscle contraction over time, the muscle starts to give up. And when the muscle starts to give up, it spasms. Think of it. Runners, what do? They load up on electrolytes. Yeah. Because what stops a muscle spasm? Salt. In every cell in the human body, 2 things must remain at an absolute balance at all times. Sodium, the other one? Potassium.
Yeah.
Sodium and potassium must always be at a balance. So if I force sodium out of a cell to save the muscle from cramping, I'm also forcing potassium out of the exact same cell. What's the one thing that when released into the bloodstream that softens the endothelium? Potassium. So what I'm doing is creating stress in my arm. By creating the stress in my arm, my body has to release sodium to stop that arm from spasming, which pushes potassium out of the cell. Potassium, as it moves through the endothelium, begins to rehydrate that sponge, which turns the sensor back on in the body. And the body says, wait a minute.
Wow.
When did the blood pressure go up? I didn't even know this. It's been 5 years and nobody told me. Wow. Oh my gosh, let's constrict, we got to hurry up and vasodilate. We got to fix this problem. So I say it's that combo shot to the corner pocket, right? It's anything but intuitive. So when someone comes up and they're like, oh, it's like, no, it's like nothing you know about. So let's just wipe the board. Let's start the fresh conversation. This is a perfect biofeedback device that is helping you do the perfect isometric exercise. And by doing an isometric exercise perfectly, it's that, I had a mentor of mine one time that always used the phrase, practice does not make perfect, only perfect practice makes perfect.
Right.
So it's like doing isometrics all day long, if not perfectly, is not going to lead to the result you're looking for. It's actually going to do nothing. It's going to do something for you. You may get better muscles, but you're not solving the problem that you're trying to solve for. This is helping you perfectly practice so that you can get to that cardiovascular health that you're looking for. And it's that isometric leads to sodium release, leads to potassium release, leads to a softened endothelium, which turns on the sensor, which lets the body regulate blood pressure the way it's always known how to do.
That is so interesting. I had no idea that it was
all in
doing
a little joystick.
all that in a little joystick. I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it here. That's awesome. I'm like,
It's kind of crazy, right?
yeah, it is crazy. I'm inspired to use this for the HRV, but like if I had high blood pressure and I was watching and listening to this, like I'd be like, yeah, I got to get one of these things. We have a link and a code for you to get this. It's Zona, ZONA.com/freedom. Our coupon code is freedom. What are we giving them in terms of a
It was
discount?
$100 off, I think.
$100 off.
Yeah.
He said it, so that must be it.
That must be it now. Commitment.
Freedom to get $100 off over at Zona.com/freedom. We'll put that link in the notes of the YouTube, the notes of the podcast. And
I have a brand new book called Metabolic Freedom, published with Hay House, being released May 13th, 2025. This book outlines the exact steps to restore your metabolism, heal your hormones, and burn fat. It presents to you the problems to why we see metabolic disease and the exact steps to restore your metabolism to burn serious fat. At the end of the book, there's a 30-day plan for you to lose up to 30 pounds in 30 days. And here's the exciting announcement. You could get this book right now. And when you order it today, you'll get a free Metabolic Freedom mini course where I teach you how the metabolism works, my favorite keto and fasting hacks to burn fat, and exclusive interviews with Dr. Jason Fung, Dr. Daniel Pompa, Cynthia Thurlow, Megan Ramos, and others. That is all for free in this mini course. If you go to the QR code on the screen right now, or if you're listening on the podcast, head to metabolicfreedombook.com or click the link at the top of the notes of this video and this podcast. You could go purchase the book right now and get immediate access to this free mini course and exclusive interviews. Click the link down below or go to metabolicfreedombook.com.
how soon are most people starting to see results with this?
Usually between like 4 to 6 weeks. Of course, I mean, clinical trials, we see a 92% efficacy. So that's
Wow.
pretty darn amazing.
Damn good.
Numbers change, and numbers change for a reason, right? Like, because most people have the same underlying thing. Now, I mean, you and I talked about a lot of reasons that you may end up with blood pressure rising. Does this fix all of that? No. The Zona,
You got to do the lifestyle work too.
Zona's not going to walk up
Yeah.
and slap you because you started to put donuts in your mouth. Like, it's not trained to do that.
That'd be cool technology.
One I don't want to be around. but the
Mark.
reality. But one of the things, like, it's not going to fix the lifestyle issues. It's not going to fix your sugar
This is
intake.
in combination with the lifestyle changes.
It's going to fix the exercise component.
Yeah. There you
Like,
go.
all of the other components are still there. It's not going to take the stress out of your life.
Yeah.
So when I look at 92% efficacy, I'm really proud of that number, to be honest with you. But for the 8%, there are some people who are resistant. But the truth of the matter is that number is, I won't even get into the numbers when it relates to pharmaceutical efficacy. Because
Not even close.
pharmaceutical efficacy is so much lower. And there is a huge population of people who are just resistant to antihypertensives.
What's
It's like,
the
what do they do?
how much money do the hypertensive medication make? Do you know? It's in the billions,
It's
right?
in the billions.
Okay, per year.
And the issue, yes. And
The
the
statins
issue
are
is,
about 14 billion a year.
and 45% of the U.S. adult population has been diagnosed with pre-hypertension to hypertension. 45% diagnosed.
That's
and think
that's
about
diagnosed.
That doesn't even
Yeah.
count for the people that aren't even diagnosed yet.
I need to find out how much the what are we calling it?
I want to quote it at like 64 billion was the number I saw last. But
No, per year?
Yes.
No,
but those
that's-
numbers are
that
all
can't
over
be
the
right.
place. You think that's too low?
No, it's too high because statins are 14 million globally. How is that so? You might be right.
People or dollars?
How much dollars the medication?
Check it out.
Okay, so how do I word this? How much money?
Try Hey Siri.
This is ChatGPT to see if I get a good study on ChatGPT. How much
Go to
money?
Perplexity. That's my favorite.
Where is it?
Perplexity. You ever done Perplexity?
No, I
AI?
haven't. But let me
Good.
just do this. You
look
do
it
that, I'll do it. So how much money does
Let's see if we
the
get the same number.
hypertensive pharmaceutical industry make globally? Globally, that's what we're looking for. All right, I had a whole bunch of typos. Hopefully they fixed that. Let's see. You look and I'll look. Globe News Wire. As of 2023, the global anti-hypertensive pharmaceutical industry generated approximately $25 billion in revenue, Projections indicate significant growth in the coming years, which estimates the suggesting market could reach 50 billion by 2033.
I'm reading U.S. population, just the United States, was $25.5 billion in 2023.
Key players are Pfizer, Novartis, Merck, Sanofi, AstraZeneca. They hate Zona.
There is that question.
These companies hate you. Wow. So it makes more than the statin industry.
Yeah.
That
it's insane.
Wild.
The amount of money. And here's the thing, like I don't want to be conspiracy theorist, and I'm not trying to throw somebody under the bus here, but back in, memory serves me correct, it was late 2022. When you and I grew up, and I'm older than you, but when you and I grew up, the 120/80 was the number, right?
Yeah.
Like good blood pressure was 120/80. Late 22, the American Heart Association came out and they were like, well, actually it's 110/72. That's our new ideal. And immediately, somebody who woke up on Tuesday morning would have been diagnosed with prehypertensive, which on Monday, they were normal.
Meaning
because
millions of prescriptions were written.
Changed the definition. It would kind of like saying, tall people are over 6 foot. And then you're like, you know what? Tall people are over 5'10". And then it's like, wow, the world's getting taller. No, you just lowered the measurement.
And that's not accurate, right? 120/80 is still
110/72 is what the American Heart Association
I understand,
says.
but what I'm asking you is, do you disagree with that? Do you think that was made to sell more medication or prescribe more medication? Do you think 120/80 is still
I'm disclaiming
fine?
that I'm not. Mine is actually 110/72, which is kind of funny. That actually is my blood pressure, which is a funny story about that.
So what are your thoughts on 120/80 then?
I believe that anywhere in that range is healthy, and I believe that different people actually run differently as a normal. We talked about HRV, find your baseline and make sure you're not going above it.
Yeah.
Like that really becomes the issue. When you start getting into the 130 plus, you're obviously in a situation. But, between 110, 120, I don't think either one of those numbers scare me.
And blood pressure is something you want to measure over time, not just freak out over one measurement.
Correct.
It's transient. So see what's happening over time. Zona.com/freedom. Freedom is the coupon code. Before we land the plane here, you have a book that just came out, which for those watching on YouTube, we have our book side by side. So the book you have
This
out.
is probably better. I'm just saying.
Hey, the title is definitely amazing. You can see Mark's beautiful photo here, Mr. Young. Radical Generosity, Living a Life Defined by Impact, written by the one and only Mark Young. Jessica McNaughton wrote the foreword. This book just came out. I was browsing through it before you came here. From transactional to transformational giving. There's abundance in here. Share with the audience why you wrote this book and what the title means to you.
It's the third book I wrote, but I'll say that what's funny about it is that the book itself is, and again, it's always a weird, humble conversation when you're like, I'm just a really generous person and I wanted to talk about it, right? Like I'm also very humble. It is but generosity to me is a lifestyle. And I believe that living with open hands and being able to give back to people, I want to leave this world a better place than I found it. And that's why the book is subheaded of Living a Life Defined by Impact. And that is, we all want to live a good life, and we want to live a good life for ourselves and our children. But do we think about the ways that we can leave the world a better place? And there's a line in one of the chapters in that book, and I think it's chapter 17 or 18, but it's talking about leaving a legacy. And there's a line that was written in there, and sometimes your own words haunt you more than the ones that other people say. And the line was, "What will be my story when I'm no longer the one telling it?" Mm-hmm. It's like when I'm not here to talk about my story and I'm not allowed to edit it anymore.
Is anybody even sharing the story?
When the book is closed and I can't make any more edits, and you know this feeling, when it goes off to publication, no more edits. What's the story? And I ask myself that question, and the answer is that doesn't start on a deathbed. That doesn't start 5 years before that. It starts now. And what are the ways that we can functionally contribute to the lives of other people and the community at large? And it's not about money, Ben. It's like, that's my biggest thing. Like, we talk about generosity and people are like, oh, how much is this going to cost? Right. Mm-hmm. Feed my children, save the zoo, save the whales, sure. Some of that stuff requires money, and I'm not taking money out of that equation, but the reality is, and I want to link this to our previous conversation for a second as well, and that is, I talk about how not just money, but how do we give our time? How do we give our wisdom? Like, you're an educator, like you run a media outlet, but it's because you're an educator, because you've put a lot of work into knowing what you know, and you're giving that. I mean, people watching your YouTube channel are watching your YouTube channel for free. Yeah. They're watching what you're doing. You are generously giving your wisdom away. How do we show up with presence? How do we put the cell phone down and just acknowledge people and let people feel seen? And sometimes that's all they want. Like, and then I lastly go into how are we generous with ourselves? Like, am I just giving, and then just wearing myself into exhaustion, and then I'm not even showing up as a good version of me? And I think that's a big thing as well. Like, all of those things matter, and all of them provide an impact in a person's life differently. I want you to specifically pay attention to chapter 2 in this book. And that's because I specifically go through the physiological impacts of generosity and how even just thinking about being a generous person downregulates the nervous system. It actually moves us into a parasympathetic response through oxytocin release in the brain. Like, literally just thinking about giving something away, much less actually giving.
That's all.
It
That's
has
amazing.
a physiological chemical reaction in the brain that, by the way, is linked to reduced blood pressure. People who just live generous lives tend to have lower blood pressure.
Yeah, I
Why?
believe it.
Well, because they're people who live in a parasympathetic state.
Yeah.
They're people who don't live in these upregulated worlds. They're people who are getting chemical impulses in the brain. They're getting those oxytocin hits every time they engage in that type of activity. And I tell you, like, it's the same as a hug. Like,
Yeah.
oxytocin is the love drug, right?
That's right.
Like, you have a bad day and have someone walk up and give you a hug. Why does the bad day just feel better now?
Yeah.
Because of an oxytocin hit. So
Smile,
if
a
there's
hug.
other ways of getting an oxytocin hit, rely on it. So
I love it,
I
bro.
love this book. I love so much about it, to be honest with you. Obviously I wrote it, but aside from that, I will say, because I've not even made a point of selling many. Like, I mean, sure, they're selling, don't get me wrong, but I'm just giving them away. Like, take it. Like, this is generosity. Like, pay it forward.
It's
like,
radical
like, do something
generosity.
for somebody else. Find a way to live that people talk about you when you're gone.
I love it, Mark. I love it. Chapter 2, I'm going to read that, but it starts off by saying a quote by Steve Maraboli: "A kind gesture can reach a wound that only compassion can heal." That's fantastic. The book's available. Where is the best place to get it? Amazon?
Go to themarkyoung.com.
themarkyoung.com.
You can see the book, everything else that I'm involved in, but also available on Amazon, available on Audible, Apple Books,
Did you narrate it?
anywhere that I did narrate it.
How fun is that?
That is the worst
pain in the
experience
butt.
ever. And I tell people to listen to it on 1.4, so it actually sounds like the way I really talk.
It is tough, you know. I'm an Audible kind of guy, but
Same.
I respect authors that narrate the book. It's really tough. I did it for this book.
It's
Metabolic
vulnerable.
Freedom. Yeah, I mean, the mic was picking up my stomach grumbling, my chain moving, and I would slip up on the easiest words.
Oh, yeah.
And I would nail the most toughest words. So
100%.
Respect, bro.
I love that. There's a story about a study that was done in a small village in France. Okay, and you don't need me to speak with a French accent to begin with. And it's like, I'm reading along, and I get to that, and I was like, okay, somebody look this up and let Google pronounce it so I don't make a fool of myself right now. Like, we had to stop the production so I knew how to pronounce it.
Yeah, there were so many words.
Terrible.
I don't know how to pronounce this word. I could write it. I could read it. But I don't know how to say it.
Sound it out, Ben. Sound it out.
Exactly. So I had this sound engineer Google it for me and play it like through the mic for me. I'm like, oh, okay, that's how you say it. And then I would forget. And then we have to repeat it. Anyways, go get the book, Radical Generosity by Mark Young.
One of the best predictors that will determine how long you live is VO2 max. VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen your body can use during intense exercise, indicating your aerobic and cardiovascular health. Now, what if there was a way to improve your VO2 max, which may extend your lifespan at the same time, help you build muscle and burn fat in a fraction of the time that it would take to go to the gym? Well, I'm referring to the Carol bike. And I gotta tell you, I've been using my Carol bike for weeks and I absolutely love this machine. The Carol bike was developed with leading exercise researchers to deliver the shortest, most effective workouts. Their signature re-hit workout workouts create the most potent training stimulus in just 2 20-second sprints. It's scientifically proven to deliver superior health and fitness benefits compared to regular cardio exercise in 90% less time. Unfortunately, 95% of Americans don't exercise, and their number one reason is they don't have time. Well, the cool thing with the 𝙎𝙬𝘼𝙍 bike is that the workouts are only 5 to 8 minutes long, and you just do 2 to 3 workouts per week, and you'll get all of these amazing results. As a subscriber to my YouTube channel, 𝙎𝙬𝘼𝑏ike is offering you $250 off your bike. Head over to 𝙎𝙬𝑏ike.com/freedom and use the coupon code FREEDOM for $250 off. We'll also drop that information in the notes down below.
The last thing I want to ask you as we finish up the conversation, speaking of like parasympathetic and generosity and oxytocin, gratitude, and what I call vitamin G and all the healing benefits of gratitude. Chapter 10 of Metabolic Freedom goes into the science of gratitude. I always like to ask my guests at the end of the conversation, what are they grateful for? What do you have vitamin G for today, Mark?
Oh, that's good. Honestly, Ben, I have vitamin G right now because I just enjoy intelligent conversation. So thank you for that.
I do too.
But aside from that, we're recording this and it's not going to be released for a while, but we're recording it on Holy Week, actually, and I'm flying back to Detroit and spending Easter with my family, and I'll be able to go to the church that I attended up north back when I lived. I didn't live here in South Florida, but lived up in Detroit, and so I'm a transplant down here to South Florida, like I think we all are.
Not me. I'm the rarity.
Yeah, you are. But 12 years later, I'm a Floridian now, but
yes.
It's going to be fun to go home and see family I haven't seen in a long time and just be able to take the weekend and be grateful for the people that, even though miles separate us, they're the closest people. My best friend still lives up there, and I just get to go spend time with the people that feed into my soul. And it's bookending two really, we had a conference last weekend that was a nonstop go, and we got a conference next weekend that'll be a nonstop go. And, originally when my dad said, "Are you coming home for Easter?" I'm like, "No, I'm staying home. I'm going to bed. I don't want him." And finally I bought a ticket. But I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's what I'm looking forward to, buddy, is just, I'm grateful for the people who, despite my distance or my busyness or my fast paced life, and to many of them, my life's not even recognizable because they can't understand what I even do on a regular basis. But man, do they fill me up.
That's awesome, brother.
If you enjoyed that conversation, you're gonna love a brand new interview I just released with Dr. William Li, all about the best foods to starve cancer, burn fat, repair DNA, and heal the body.
So I'm not saying yogurt's bad, I'm saying yogurt's good. However, the blueberry your favorite yogurt, there's like a band of jelly. So you open it up, you stir it up, and now you've got your blueberry low-fat yogurt. Good for you, right? You got berries, you got low-fat. Wrong.